Thank you, Corbin. So as Corbin mentioned, a lot of the information that we're going to be, that Jesus and I are going to be presenting in this webinar has to do with what we talked about at Till Fire Farm. And for those that were present at that time, this might be a little bit repetitive, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we identify a couple of people and like other Northeast organizations that have the interest in moving forward with this. So we do have a quick agenda. We already went through the introductions and the presentation. We're first going to be talking about the agroecology encounters, specifically about the methodology, the I can't even say that word, pedagogy, dynamics, and structure. And then we're going to move on into briefing on previous agroecology encounters that have happened nationally and internationally. And then we're going to have an open discussion to reflect on what's been presented and what our next steps are going to be to move forward.
So yeah, and I wanted to underline what Corbin said. This conversation comes with some events that already happened, that are these agroecology encounters that have happened in different parts of the U.S. and also in Puerto Rico. So just have that context, because we're going to be talking a lot of things that already happened, and also events and activities that we want to happen, like because there's an interest in the Northeast region. So we're just trying to give the context, the methodology of previous encounters, to see and kind of feel the pulse between you guys of if you're interested in doing something like this, or what are your views. So for us, it's very important at the end that we have an open and sincere discussion. So let's just start, and with the first slide after the agenda. And it's just a brief context about agroecology. We just want to know, since each of us gave a little brief explanation on what words come to mind when we hear agroecology. So 4 years ago in Jakarta, in Indonesia, La Via Campesina, with its international articulation that has a lot of groups from different parts of the world. They meet every 4 years to kind of update their vision, their mission, and they do kind of a manifesto, you know. So they called the 4 years ago, it was the Jakarta call, and they updated their definition about agroecology, and we have included it here. So if I don't know if everybody's seeing the presentation, but if someone can read what that first paragraph.
I'll read it. Peasant agriculture, artisanal fisheries, and herding remain the source of most of our food. Peasant agroecology is a social and ecological system encompassing a great diversity of technologies and practices that are culturally and geographically rooted. It removes dependencies on agrotoxins, rejects confined industrial animal production, uses renewable energies, and guarantees healthy food. It enhances dignity, honors traditional knowledge, and restores the health and integrity of the land. Food production in the future must be based on a growing number of people producing food in more resilient and diverse ways.
And also the second one, sorry.
Sure. Agroecology defends biodiversity, cools down the planet, and protects our soils. Our agricultural model not only can feed all of humanity, but is also the way to stop the advance of the climate crisis through local production in harmony with our forest and waterways, enhancing diversity and returning organic matter to natural cycles.
Okay, so yeah, we included this definition of agroecology because it's the one that we can connect more, and we just wanted to emphasize that agroecology is a technical approach for agriculture, for farming, and for rescuing ancestral practices, but it's also a social movement. So we see agroecology as a way to create community and to make food accessible, and also keep forming ourselves politically and also in our territories, in our farms, in our communities, etc. And somebody mentioned the world cooptation of agroecology, and we need to keep that in mind, because right now agroecology is kind of it's cool, you know, everybody's talking about it, so we need to keep defending the official meaning and what gave birth to agroecology, so that it's not used for other purposes. And in the next slide, we have also the quick definition of food sovereignty, because they're both related. So if someone can go ahead and read it.
This is Andriana, I'll read it. Food sovereignty now transforming our world. Food sovereignty is a key part of the fight for social justice, bringing together many sectors from the countryside and the city. Food sovereignty is the fundamental right of all peoples, nations, and states to control food and agricultural systems and policies, ensuring everyone has adequate, affordable, nutritious, and culturally appropriate food. This requires the right to define and control our methods of production, transformation, distribution, both at the local and international levels.
So yeah, we wanted to include also the food sovereignty concept, since it's more broad, and so agroecology fits with food sovereignty. Agroecology is the vehicle to achieving food sovereignty. And so we just wanted to have, you know, that the struggle for food sovereignty comes hand in hand with agroecology. They both concepts and both practices need each other in order to be, you know, to be successful. So we just wanted to have that context. And if somebody wanted to add something about agroecology or food sovereignty, this is also, you know, feel free to interrupt or give any insight, because next we're going to start with the encounters and methodologies. So if someone wants to give any quick thought on these topics, feel free to do it now.
So this is Adriana, and I do, you know, have one thought, and Salo had mentioned that he feels that agroecology is part of food sovereignty, so agroecology is food sovereignty. I spent, I don't know, 15 years working with fishing communities, and referring to artisanal fisheries within agroecology is a little bit challenging when you're speaking with fishing communities, especially here in the United States, where they are not necessarily both fishermen and farmers, as I know in many other parts of the country they are both. It's a little bit, they don't relate, you know, they just don't relate. The fishing communities really do not relate to the term agroecology because of the agro part of it. And through my work that I've done with fishing communities, a reaction that I have received is, oh, well, they're just kind of tagging us along, but we're really not agro. We're not agro. We're fisheries. We're marine. We're, you know, of the water, not necessarily of the land. But I do, again, through my work with fishing communities, food sovereignty resonates with the fishing community. So I know that I am currently in the agriculture world, but whenever I see something like that, I can't help but think about the fishing communities and the importance for us to be very specific and intentional and thoughtful with our definitions and the way that we are conveying ourselves.
Great, thank you. Anyone else that wants to add something? Okay, so yeah, that's a very interesting approach. I think, yeah, food sovereignty, it's kind of bigger, and it talks also about people that fish, gatherers, people that deal only with animals but not produce, vegetables and fruits. So yeah, I think it's an important response, that one that you gave, and I think maybe it makes more sense for food sovereignty being more, more a bigger concept, to use it to relate more to people that not only, do farming. So yeah. Okay, so the next slides are going to be more about the encounter, so I'll pass this through to Katia.
Yeah, so we say that agroecology is a social movement at a global and local scale, in a way that it's global scale in a way that it's creating that quote-unquote alternative that's affecting our well-being, and a local level, and how knowledge is then disseminated back in our communities, and in what way. So we gotta have both, and at the same time, that's how we create that internationalism, and identifying some of the allies from whom we learn their successes and how that could be applied at a local scale. Next slide. So within the agroecology encounters, it's designed in a way that it addresses issues that affects a particular region, or that is more relevant to a particular area. So in the past, to my understanding, some of the agroecology encounters that have happened sort of focus on a specific community. So what Adriana mentioned about fisheries, it could be something that that is designed around that to sort of create consciousness within the audience as to why it's important, and why fisheries shouldn't be excluded when we talk about agroecology and food sovereignty. Next.
So yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so methodology and pedagogy. So there's the camps and encounters that have been done. We try to be very specific about the methodology in terms of being strategic on what we want to achieve. And it's very important, as Katia said, the region. So if there's interest in doing a Northeast agroecology encounter, so the actors are going to be organizations that are within that region. But also these kind of encounters also share an international perspective. So that's why, for example, me, that I'm from Puerto Rico, and we've been like helping each other between all of these encounters. Well, we're sharing our views on it. And also MSP from Brazil have been present in other encounters, Canada with Unión Paisan. So it's also keeping, the communication from different regions and also countries, just to keep working around agroecology. So some of the principles that have been identified for some of the encounters and camps have been start from and valorize traditional or local wisdom and knowledge, construct power and knowledge horizontally and collectively, utilize popular education techniques and methods, participatory dialogue, reflection, observation, grounded in liberation pedagogy, based in praxis, bridges theory and practice, connects social and political dynamics to technical dimensions. So basically it's having in these encounters the kind of, having panels to discuss anything that we want to discuss, like if we have problems with the GMO industry, or specific problems with a specific community, but also having time to practice agroecology, just not stay in theory or in just political formation. So and we have done that in different ways. depending on which region we are. So next slide.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add a little bit more to the methodology and pedagogy in terms that it's not something new, but rather what we carry with us from our ancestors. Like earlier I mentioned how agroecology reminds me of my grandfather, because this is knowledge that wasn't recognized, and as Jesus had mentioned as well, agroecology has become something really trendy. So how we relate that to where we come from and who we are. And in terms of it's not using the traditional model where the outsider comes and dictates what and how it needs to be done, but rather everyone, it's something collective, everyone contributes, as we would say, their small piece of sand. Because the only way we can make this our movement is by talking by our own experiences. And then it goes back to the elements of the methodology, which are to see, to judge, and to act. It can only be created based on issues and situations that affect a particular community, and it determines the observations and reflect on it. So it goes to the same what it said earlier about having theory and practice, because you cannot have one without the other. So I just wanted to add on that. So talking about the methodology and the three elements, which are the political formation, technical formation, and the cultural and community expression. In terms of political, if you could go to the next slide. In terms of the political formation, it's talking about and understanding the historical background of that particular region or of that particular space, in what brought us to where we are at the moment. Sharing with each other perspectives and opinions. Right here we have a few samples of how that political formation takes place. And we're going to explain furthermore the terminology in terms of the base groups and sharing the own historical background and how it has a tie to the bigger discussion, right? So how your own personal connection connects to other people's personal struggle. Next slide. In terms of the technical formation, as I said, applying the theory, what's been learned from workshops, from panels, doing collective work, learning on how to do things the natural way, where people are not harming the land, where people are not harming Mother Earth. But also something that I noticed throughout the technical formation, that it creates that dialogue and that space for people to relate and build on something that has been started. Next slide. And then the third one, which is the cultural and community expression, and that's where we talk about the místicas, a space for reflection, a space to appreciate and reflect on the day, or sharing own personal connection, being grateful. And the místicas, we associate it as something cultural because it's a way to start the day, create a dialogue of knowledge, doing demonstrations, sort of demonstrating with other participants what the current struggle in that particular area is.
Okay, so and also to talk a little bit more about the methodology and kind of more about structure once we are in the encounter. We usually have 4 or 5 kind of groups that we work, and the first one is the base group, and base groups are basically once we go to the encounter, because some of the encounters have been in the form of camps, and others, you know, we have day activities, then we sleep somewhere, and then we come back again the other day in the morning and just be there until like 5 or 6 or whatever. So base groups is basically having the audience or the participants divided in groups since the first day, so that they can be responsible for the social dynamics in the camp, for cleaning, for cooking, so that we can build the community, because a lot of an important part of these encounters are also living as we want to live for 3 days or however, whatever length is the encounter. So we're going to be creating that community, and we're going to be rotating responsibilities in terms of cleaning, in terms of cooking, in terms of different responsibilities. So base groups are very important for that. And also we have working collectives that they address a specific topic. For example, if we want to have the documentation of everything that's happening, so we'll have a working collective specifically working on communications and media, just creating short videos, documenting with photography, etc. And also the místicas and the cultural expression. As Katia mentioned, it's very important. It makes us kind of connect more. So and it also implements international aspect of the struggle. So we try to have an open space for people to share ideas on anything that that we want to do in the morning. For example, if we want to do a circle and have some verses or poetry around the struggle, or if we want to do have some seeds, etc. So, but it gives the opportunity for people to connect. So that's also a very important working collective. So we have base groups, working collectives, and also, next slide, please. We have a Comisión Política Pedagógica. So that's a long and difficult Spanish words, but we've left it in Spanish because that's how usually everybody knows that group, like the CPP. So in English it would be Political and Pedagogical Commission. So this group is very important because it's kind of the coordination team of the event, and they are kind of responsible for having the event happen, for planning, etc. And it has served the CPP has served as a space also to connect with other groups. So that's kind of the first thing that needs to happen. And the CPP normally its participants are people that represent groups from their region. So any interested groups that are on this call that maybe want this to happen, they can be part of the CPP. And also it has fewer members that can be like as international allies or as support. And so yeah, that's the CPP or Political and Pedagogical Commission. Then the last two groups are facilitators. So facilitators are normally once the strategic document or of the encounter is done. So we want a panel on GMOs, or we want a panel on how people are working around agroecology and a specific community in New York or whatever, or with schools. So which facilitators can be identified for organizing a panel around that or whatever. So facilitators are going to be kind of resources that the encounter are going to have. And in most of the cases, facilitators are participants also of the encounter. They don't come only to give the lecture and they go. They usually are a participant, and in one moment they need to give some workshop or whatever. And the last group, but also very important, it's technical support. And technical support are people or groups that that kind of support the encounter, and they can give support in different kind of ways, financially. They can give support with experience, because many of the technical support people that have helped have already experience in methodology, in other encounters in different parts of the world. So technical support is very important for all of this to happen too. So yeah, so base groups, working collectives, CPP, facilitators, and technical support. It's kind of the structure.
Jesus, I have a question.
Yeah.
Just wondering, in the encounters that have happened in the past that have been successful, like what's the amount of people that actually attended? Is there a minimum or maximum that makes sense? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, okay, that's a very good question. It depends. For example, we have the first, we're going to see the pictures at the end, but the first encounter that, I mean, there have been other encounters happening around the world, but with this kind of, with people that we've been in touch, it was in Florida, and it was 2015. And that was also the first agroecology encounter in North America. So that one had a good amount of time for planning, and also some good resources in terms of having a big audience or participants. So I don't remember the number. Maybe Saulo knows the number of people that assisted, but it depends, because for example, in Puerto Rico, we have done 2, and we have done it the first one we did it, there were like 30 people, 35 people, because it's like it was a camp, so we had limited resources. And then the second one, we had a bigger CPP, so a bigger coordination team, and more representative of what's happening along agroecology in our island. So we expanded it to like 55, almost 60 people. And so yeah, it depends on the capacity. You know, that question will be more, it will be answered better by the people from the region and the organizations, to see how much do they think they can handle, and also how broad are their communication. You know, how many people do you guys think that want to get in? So yeah, it depends.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And this is Andrea, and I have a couple questions. Can you go back to the first, can you go back 2 slides? So the base group, no, the working collective, sorry, the working collectives. So that is several different groups within the working collective. So you have different groups that track health and hygiene, transportation, housing, logistics, etc. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then that means that within these 5, so I have a couple things. One is, within these 5 different groups, there are quite a few individuals. So let's say, to make it simple, 5 people per group. So that's 25 people in the planning of the encounter. Correct?
Yeah, you say 25 people on the planning of the encounter.
Yeah, essentially, if we're looking at these 5 different groups, the base camps, working collective.
Yeah, but some of them can repeat. For example, you can be in more than one group. For example, usually people that are coordinating have maybe they're in a working collective also. So it depends on how the group divides the task. And also base groups are more when the encounter starts happening.
Right.
It's once we're there. Working collectives are planned ahead, like who's gonna help getting the people from the airport to, you know, or etc.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And so it's just also interesting because I was at the meeting in Soulfire Farm, and you know, this is great and it's exciting, but I'm just, the one thing that I'm feeling is we're being presented with the structure. So, and I've had this question when I was at Soulfire. I guess I'm not quite sure at what point you're asking for our input. Are you saying, well, this is what we're proposing to you, or this is an option and we can work with it so that it works the best with our region and with our, communities? So I don't know if this structure that you're presenting us is the structure that we will be following, or it is a proposed structure that we can, tweak if need be.
Yes. Well, I think for us, it's kind of, we're just giving this as reference. I think it's an open conversation, so we can see this as a proposal, but it's not something final. For us, we just want to give the experience that we have already have. And this has been different in every type of encounter, depending from the specific region. So so this is just kind of giving reference and ideas on things that have already happened, because we do, in terms of the people that have been participating in some of the encounters, on kind of also helping them happen. We're very interested in covering like the political part of agroecology, and also the practical. So so in that, we are kind of, we do want that to happen, not to be just a regular conference where everybody goes and then we go. So we just want to give the reference, but it's an open conversation. We can say, okay, we don't need this type of group for the one in this region, or we should do another group, or so it's not like, let's sign this, and it's just giving reference so that people maybe that have not participated can see how this happens,
Okay.
Can I say something, Jesus?
Yes.
I think the issue about, because I think this structure that has been done is also based in principles, right? So working collectives comes to the idea, the pedagogy, that a component of the work is important for people to understand the process and contribute and learn what agroecology is. So that's how it came about, right? But as you point out, it is the way it's organized is changing. But the component of working collectives is a critical piece in the pedagogy that is being presented here. That's what I understand, Jesus, too.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that so in trying to identify within, if we're thinking of doing a Northeast Agroecology encounter and sort of identifying who is interested in being part of the CPP, then we are presenting this more of a general model to have an idea of what does it take and what does it require for an agroecology encounter, so that you're not like technically like part of the CPP blindfolded, not knowing what's expected. And then adding on to what Paulo mentioned, that is part of the methodology. And the other thing is for all of the work not to be relied on one person. If this is a collective, if this is something that's going to be learning and sharing from one another, it also needs to reflect within the structure, from like getting the logistics, doing the logistics, putting content together, and continuing and making sure that methodology is also reflected in that space.
And is there any question or somebody that wants to add something about what we've talked so far? Feel free to do it now too. Okay, we'll keep going. Katya, I think this is yours, right?
Yeah. So, so as we're talking about the strategic plans and the in terms of the agroecology encounter is something that needs to be identified, and as I mentioned earlier, how each region has a specific topic or theme. It's part of the objectives that that particular region has. So right here we have an example of the objectives that were put together at the first Campesino Agroecology Encounter in Florida back in 2015. And for those who can't see the slides, these are the objectives that were presented there, which is strengthen place-based technical capacity in agroecology amongst campesinos, campesinas based on the value of traditional wisdom and cultures of practice, explore the political and social context of agroecology in theory and practice, understand the importance of peasant organizations and their basis to organize in the U.S. in connection with global social movements for agroecology, food sovereignty, and social transformation, and develop a long-term regional plan for agroecology that values the role of all members of the community along with the ancestral wisdom of the campesino. So as you can see, the topic and the theme of this particular agroecology encounter was the struggles of the campesinos and the farm workers in the United States, and how that is connected to a global movement and a global struggle. So that's what I mean when I say identifying a theme or a topic for a specific encounter. Yeah. And
yeah, and here we provided an example of a day agenda. So this was taken from our last encuentro in just last month in Puerto Rico, and it was, I'm just going to read it real quick so that you can have an idea of the times and what we do. For example, that was the first day on Friday. It was at 9 a.m. We arrived and set up the camp. Okay, so this encounter was in a farm. So and everything has to do with the region, because as Katia mentioned, in Florida there was a lot of emphasis on the farm workers, because we were in a territory that a lot of farm workers do their work, and also they have begun to establish community gardens that are based on agroecology. So it was an important and enthusiastic conversation. And down here in Puerto Rico, it's more kind of a lot of young people are doing agroecology, also with elder people, and there's a lot of emphasis on having the farm to be like the school. So we never should be away from the farm. So we put a lot of effort in the coordination teams, the working collectives to get everything to the farm. For example, we were in a farm that it's like 35 to 40 minutes away from the city, in a rural community in Puerto Rico near San Juan. So there's so we took things to cook. We took tents. So everything, there's no light even there, so we had fire, etc. So it was a lot of planning, but it turned out to be okay, and people liked it. So we were there on Friday 9 a.m. We arrived and set up the camp at 11 a.m. We had a presentation just as we did here, but in a Mystica, so having kind of cultural elements, so to have people start connecting and also learning from. Specifically, we had an international delegation also that came to visit. So and at 12 p.m. We had lunch. Then at 1 p.m. we had breaking schemes, living in common unity, review of goals, objectives, and agenda of the encounter camp. At 2:30 we have a workshop which was kind of a visionary planning, kind of strategic planning workshop. That the main question was where we come from and where we want to go, and that gave the opportunity to people to kind of get to know each other more, and also why we think we were there. to kind of start thinking about what we want this to be the result at the end of the camp. So then 4:30 dinner, then 6 p.m. fire, open space for reflection and sharing. People bring instruments and we can sing along. And at 6:30, I think it started like 6:30 to 7 p.m. We had a workshop, agroecology and politics, how do we do it? So that was one day, for example. And on Saturday, we had 6 a.m. breakfast, 7 a.m. work on a farm. So for us, it was very important to have all the morning, which is the moment that is less sun during the day, to work on the farm. So we had base groups doing different kinds of things. Some of them were working with compost and learning how to prepare a good compost. Some of them were harvesting and planting traditional root vegetables of Puerto Rico and learning about them. Some of them were doing other stuff. So for us, it's very important. We gave like 4 hours of farming work, and then we all eat together, and at 12:30 we start giving more panels and workshops, etc. And so yeah, that's just the dynamics. We do 3 days encounters in Puerto Rico. So 2 days in 2 days we wake up in the farm. So those 2 days we have farming work, and the first day we don't have farming work because we're kind of setting up everything. So that's kind of the format that we do here, and that's just a very quick, we're going very quickly through it just so that you have an idea. But there has been other formats. So this is just something that happened that are more, more structured on getting to a specific place, then going out, then visiting another community. So it depends on whatever the people from the region want to do. So next slide.
Yeah. So usually from what I've seen, it's that the agroecology encounters usually happen during the weekend, or 2 days and a half, or 3 days, but it doesn't end there. It's something that keeps going, something continual. It's part of it. It's not just of going there and whatever you learn just stays there, but how do we keep moving and how do we keep growing? So bringing in all of that knowledge, all of what happened there back to our communities. For example, I've been participating in this agroecology encounters as the food justice coordinator, but part of my role is to come back and share all that information with members of CATA whom are farm workers, and have some of that knowledge that we've already talked about. Also, how we usually conclude. So it's not about like what happened there, just stay there. Usually, when we talked about the base groups, a representative of each base group is chosen to contribute to a declaration. The declaration states what happened there, what are the next steps, and how are we going to move forward. And one example that I wanted to share is that, for example, from the Florida Agroecology Encounter, there were a group of grassroots organization representatives that continued the conversation and the dialogue and seeing how this was going to be implemented. And we then continue with a process of phone calls and learning about other international allies and international movements and how that could be applied. And up to now, it's not like you cannot determine what the process is going to look like, but it's still ongoing. So it does take some dedication as to how we are going to maintain that communication. Next slide. Yeah, and this is just an example of the final report from the Campesino a Campesino Agroecology Encuentro in Florida. It details all the workshops where that happened, who participated, what was done, the explanation of the key terms as we have already explained here. Next. So now we wanted to move on and talk about each of the agroecology encounters that have happened in the U.S. and Puerto Rico and internationally. So as I've already mentioned, and we're just going to share a couple of pictures about that. To your, I'm looking at it, to your left, you could see that's a mural that was specifically painted for this agroecology encounter. It happened in Fellsmere and Homestead, Florida, and the host organization was the Farm Worker Association of Florida, and that was in February of 2015. To the right, you have a picture of the participants congregating into a mystica, and usually when the mystica is happening, as Jesus mentioned part of it, you could bring seeds, you could bring something personal, something that connects you to the land. A lot of the times, something that's really symbolic are the flags. It could be flags from movements, flags from your organization, posters, and other objects of significance. Next slide. Here we have a couple more pictures of one of the base groups talking and having a dialogue around some of the previous panels and workshops that happened throughout that day. And to the right, there's a picture of people who were part of the CPP for this particular encounter. Next slide.
So yeah, here is a picture of the International Agroecology Encounter in Cuba. This is also, we put this as a reference because some of us participated in that encounter, but more as participants. This is a big encounter, and it's done every 2 years in Cuba. That it's kind of a world reference around agroecology. So one of the interesting things that Katia mentioned is that we don't want the conversation to end when the encuentro ends. That what usually happens with conferences. We want to kind of make sure to keep that communication going, have a declaration, have next dates of meetings between the people, the groups that participated, in order to keep forming ourselves and also kind of spreading agroecology along the way. So visiting Cuba was kind of part of that, because after the first encounter, we started doing phone calls that like this, kind of forming ourselves more around agroecology. So we made a phone call with Peter Rosset from Via Campesina, for example. So we had like 1.5 hours to talk with him about all the development around agroecology in Cuba. We made some calls also with other groups in the US, but also internationally, as the MST in Brazil. And it was kind of a working collective that we were kind of learning more and keeping the conversation going, even though we are from different regions or parts of the world. And that gave space to visiting Cuba. There was an interest on this encounter that is being done every 2 years. So for us, it was a good way to meet again, to keep the conversation going, the plans going, and also learlearning more about all of the information that Cuba has to mention. For example, these were places where they work with compost, biodigestor, which I don't know the word in English. But it's kind of a renewable energy source. And people were divided, participants were divided to different regions from Cuba to see agroecology examples, see how they coordinate their movement, how they have promoters, how they have people that farm, how do they take it to schools, to public policy, etc. So it was a very great learning experience for us.
Hey y'all, just real quick, it's 3:07, so I just want us to be mindful of time so we have enough opportunity to open it up for a conversation. So maybe if we could do it.
Yeah, quickly share. For the Mid-Atlantic Agroecology Encounter, it happened in Maryland last year, almost a year ago, July 2016. And just want to say that one of the main components of that is that it was held at a farm as well as it has happened in Puerto Rico. And we had, next slide, we had many of the participants were youth. So it's also an opportunity to teach the youth, for them to see farming as something else. And something I wanted to add is that usually farm work is seen as something dirty. So how do we change that perspective and that mentality within the youth, and pass on that knowledge, because a lot of elders are the ones who retain that knowledge, and it's not really passed on. So how do we make sure something ongoing?
So yeah, and real quick, this was the first encounter that was done in Puerto Rico. It was in the central part of the island, and this picture is just how we started the camp, everyone kind of presenting themselves and setting up the camp. Next slide. And these here are 4 pictures kind of illustrating, like for example, a base group doing their work around one aspect that was part of the agenda, then another base group doing their work specifically on farming practices around agroecology. And yeah, that's just a picture of every morning, you know, the sun came out, so people woke up very early just to see it. And it was in the central parts of the mountain. And the second camp was in Toalta. That was the one that I first mentioned. That's like 30 minutes away from the city. And here was more difficult in terms of the planning, because in the first one we do had more access to electricity. And you know, if we had a panel like through Skype with some international allies. And in this one, we were all the time in the farm. That's a group picture of the people that participated, including an international delegation that participated. And next slide. And yeah, and these are just pictures of the farm that we were and some of the work that we were doing. Also a panel for all the participants around farmers that have been doing agroecology in different parts of the island. And that picture, they were discussing also like kind of the race aspect of agroecology and kind of visualizing more the work of black farmers. And I know also that was a big topic in the Mid-Atlantic encounter. And yeah, and this was harvesting just some ñame. It's like a root vegetable that we farm a lot here in Puerto Rico. I think this is the final slides. Next slide. Yeah, and just, yeah, now it's like open discussion, any questions, insights, if there's interest in forming like a coordination team. And so yeah, now it's open space, so we could just keep the communication going.
Yeah, Jesus and Katia, one thing that would be helpful if we could explain how agroecology encounter helps strengthen the organizing around agroecology in the region, right? What is the benefit to participate in a process like this, to the ongoing organizing, and how this encounter can help to bring different groups together in the region. I think it would be good if you could touch base on that.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, in terms of what happens after an agroecology encounter, it's very important for us, and at least in my region, it has helped us to keep that communication going, which is very important. And also, we were very interested in having other social movements or environmental groups to participate, to kind of get them in the agroecology conversation. So now when we, and what you learn in 3 days of an agroecology encounter, it's what for many of us have been a process of many years, you know, because you don't meet, you know, all these persons and all of this information, you get it in 3 days. So it's kind of a boost to the work that we like to do and to keep that conversation going. And for us, it has helped us to, for example, to have more force in the developing of public policy around food sovereignty in Puerto Rico, because we have connected with other people. People understand agroecology and the struggle for food sovereignty, and it's very logical to them, specifically for like groups that are very formed politically, or that are very focused on organizing community. Agroecology, if they're not farming or if they are only doing community gardens or whatever, it gets to them. So for us, it has helped us a lot around that, and also with the international aspect, just keeping the conversation with groups in the US, with friends in Canada, in other parts of Latin America. So yeah, it makes us feel also like not so alone, because most of the problems that we are dealing with repeat themselves in almost every part of the world. So it's also kind of an experience for kind of be recharged, you know. So that's my impression.
Yeah, I would say that, for example, here in this region, there might be a lot of disconnection between organizations from different sectors. For example, how these spaces bring together, in this case, I would say farm workers and farmers, because they have that misconception that farmers are bad and farmers exploit farm workers. So how do we create that that relationship, and how do we not just assume things, right, for them to see that with their own eyes and explore that as well. And at the same time, when we talk about social in a political movement, it brings in different people's expertise, like how like one might have more experience in one section, and how that could contribute to the other one.
So one comment I have, this is Andriana. When we, you had just mentioned Jesus bringing in the environmental community and, you know, other communities into this dialogue, so that it's essentially embedded in a lot of different efforts and struggles and campaigns and movements. For Nielani, the 2007, the conference, the Forum on Food Sovereignty, we organized different caucuses. So we had 3 different caucuses. One was a youth caucus, one was a women's caucus, and one was the environmental caucus. World March on Women led the women's caucus. The youth caucus, I can't remember, I think it was the Via Campesina Youth, and Friends of the Earth International and all the various country chapters led the environmental. And the purpose of it was they were sure to participate, and obviously Nielani was a much different scale than what we're talking about, but they participated in each of the various workshops, each of the tracks, to make sure that there was a constant consciousness of issues surrounding women, issues surrounding the youth, and issues about the environment, so that it was never approached piecemeal. It was always approached together. Then the caucuses would come back together every evening to share amongst each other, you know, what they learned and what information they provided to each of the tracks, each of the workshops. So that's just something to think about in organizing this and bringing in the different movements and organizations and communities to this effort. And then also thinking about that and looking at your item number 2 here, coordination team, there's so many awesome youth groups working around on food issues, and it'd be great to bring one of them into the coordination team.
Yeah, you just met with one, right, Andriana? Just last week.
I did just meet with him. Awesome woman who works with the Youth Justice Food Network, or Farm Network, yeah.
Yeah, I did invite them to this call, so I'll be following up.
Oh, cool, great. Great.
This is Onika. I love what you guys have discussed, and I thank you for all the clarity around these different types of gatherings, which I had kind of heard of but didn't really, I've never been, so I didn't know what was going on there. I have some really just like very logistical basic questions around funding and how people are able to travel to these. How is there fundraising involved? You know, I think that from my perspective as just a person, I would love to go. I think from my perspective as someone who works with the community and farm school, I'm sure many of our students would like to go. So that's one question. The other question is just around who's invited and how we're reaching out. You know, I think that there are people with various degrees of understanding of agroecology in particular, but even just food justice issues in a larger scale. And I'm wondering what level we're speaking at during these gatherings, and if there needs to be some discussion along those lines, because it's something that I think about in our own courses, our own community. You know, not everyone's starting from the same level of understanding, and if we want to move certain conversations forward, do we need to think about that when we're inviting people who might be newer to these concepts or more further along in their thinking?
So yes, like at least like Katia and me are here kind of giving this information because it has already happened. For us, it would be, I think, the most important thing to happen after the meeting in New York and then this one. It's if there's interest in forming, you know, in having this type of event or something similar, and forming a coordination team, like with the suggestions that have already happened, because many of these questions are going to be more addressed or with the people responsible. We can give our insights on what we have done, but it's the contexts are so different. For example, in Puerto Rico, we've done it very we've done it a lot of voluntary work to get this happen, and the international delegation that participated, they covered, they organized a delegation, and they financial covered themselves to be part of our experience, because we had zero budget. We just farmed a lot to have food for the event, and also we charged an optional $20 donation for each participant, because it was 3 days, to cover for materials and extra food that we needed to buy. But that was it. But that was a very different approach, for example, than for the Florida event in 2015 that had a budget and etc. And so yeah, it kind of it's the coordination teams kind of, you know, need to see what they want to make happen, explore maybe some, you know, financial ways to get help, or see with the technical support. There's also people in these groups that have experience on that, but it depends. It really depends on what type of activity and reach you guys want to do.
Yeah, from my own personal experience, like the only one that I've participated as part of the CPP is from the encounter that happened in the Mid-Atlantic region last year. So we did set up a website for fundraising, like a crowd race type, and we also drafted some proposals to some foundations to get some of that. Thinking about what was needed, and all the infrastructure and all that. In terms of the coordination team and how we determine who's invited, that's one of the reasons why we try to identify, for sure, most of the CPP has to be grassroots-led organizations, and part of that is because, as I said, there's a lot of disconnection. So, for example, here in the Northeast, someone else might know of another good organization that I haven't heard of. So, like, that's one of the purposes of having a diverse coordination team, to be able to identify some of those participants.
So yeah, I don't know if if Saul or Corbin want to add something, or if we want to give any more information or questions.
The only thing I would add at this point is that, I mean, it might be unclear, you know, why Hunger's relationship to some of this has been, and that has been kind of more technical and logistical support, and some of that has been providing some funding and some travel grants for people to attend some of these encounters. So that's part a part of supporting these encounters and some of the logistical aspects that we support with.
Yeah, and at least in the conversation, in the meeting that was held in New York, there was kind of the final day. There was like you know, that the few people that participated wanted to get this going. You know, so there was this planning of this webinar to kind of go more deeper on what has been done, and sharing some of the methodology, so that you know, the region doesn't have to start from zero. But yeah, the question really is if we want to go ahead with having this type of encounter, or an encounter around agroecology in the Northeast region, and maybe start building that coordination team, because it really depends on the coordination team. Once a good coordination team is there, it starts flowing. But the coordination team should be representative of what you guys were talking. If there's youth involved that are very active, maybe some groups that are present now in this conversation, but maybe others that are not. So that depends, or if you guys want to plan another meeting, or maybe discuss it with your memberships, but yeah, I really don't know what's the next step.
I think it would be really helpful if we could be given an idea of exactly what would be expected of the coordination team, generally, you know, about how many months. I mean, I'm not quite sure if it would be, you know, what you're envisioning currently the timeline to be, if it's 9 months from now, if it's 6 months, if it's a year from now. So it'd just be good to have in one email some of those details. How long, what exactly is expected, so that people have an idea if they have the time to be able to commit. And then also, if we want to reach out to anybody else who may be appropriate, to be able to give them enough background information, what's expected of them over how much, you know, what length of time.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure that, well, none of us want to, you know, put folks, like, have folks make a decision right at this moment. One thing that I can do is follow up with people with a clear sort of outline of what the expectations might be, and then follow up with folks individually about interest. And then the folks that want to move forward with it, we can then begin with a first call to try to get it moving. And if folks have other folks that want to be invited in to participate in a coordination team. So that's one possibility for moving forward.
That would work for me. This is Honika. I think that would be really helpful.
Sounds good.
Sweet. Are there any final or remaining questions or thoughts?
Just one thought in pulling together the coordination team, which I'm sure you already are very sensitive to, just making sure that there's balance. Men, women, people of color, just really be so intentional that there's a good balance.
Definitely. Thank you for bringing that up again. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and also if people are not sure if I don't know if I have the time to coordinate or whatever, but at least if they can find somebody else in their organization to maybe contribute to coordination, and that would be great. It's more of the question if the participants, at least in this call, are kind of want to go ahead with having an encounter like this. It will be, good to know if those organizations that you're representing want to do it, so that we can get more like a specific, take the pulse out of the situation.
Well, we'll have to add Quebec on the image,
Yes.
It seems to me I have not heard anybody saying that we should not have. I think it seems that is a good idea for folks. I think there's certainly issues about the expectation time to participate in calls for this coordination. And the other thing is that since it's a long-term process, right, it's not only an event, but it's a way of building something together. It would be also good the ways to explore ways of building the relationship between this group and more people, right? Maybe if we don't have a full-blown encounter, it would be a good idea to have at least an in-person encounter for us to continue building together, because this is not just an event. That's what I understand. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. So it sounded like folks were good with having me follow up with people with, some more information about the expectations, and then following up after folks have some time to think about it and talk with maybe other folks in their respective organizations. And yeah, thank you so much to Jesus and Katia for that awesome presentation and for taking the time, and thanks to you all for taking time out of your day to join us and have this conversation. It excites me that folks are interested in this process, and yeah,